Welcome to the Center Ice Hockey Podcast with your hosts, Ryan Atkinson, Matt Minchin, Nino Lagambina, and Tom Dixon. Die-hard NHL fans covering the latest news at the center of the hockey universe.
Hey guys, you're listening to the first episode of the Center Ice Hockey Podcast. Thanks for listening, and we're just going to tell you a little bit about us before we get started. I'm Ryan Atkinson.
I am Nino Lagambina.
I'm Tom Dixon.
And I'm Matt Minchin, and this is just going to be a hockey show where we sit down and talk about the latest news and events going around the hockey world. We're just four guys from Buffalo who love hockey and have a huge passion for the sport. Don't worry, we're going to keep this as unbiased as possible and keep this a grounded show about the league and the events going on around it.
All right, so since the league is a little bit under a week away, we're just going to get started with our preseason predictions in this episode. We're going to start off by doing our top three and bottom three teams for the entire league, our most improved and biggest drop-off teams from last season, our award winners, and those awards are going to be the Art Ross, the Rocket Richard, the Calder, the Selke, the Vezina, the Norris, and the Jack Adams. Then we're going to get into our three boomer players, and these are players who we may think are underrated right now, or players that maybe didn't have as good a seasons as they wanted to last year, and we think these guys are going to be really good this year and have big numbers. And then we're going to get into our playoff teams and wildcard predictions for each conference and division, and then we're going to end it off by doing our Stanley Cup predictions. So I'm going to throw it back to Ryan.
All right, guys, let's get this prediction episode started. We're going to do our top three teams and bottom three teams first. I'm going to say my predictions and kick it around the table. For my top three teams in the league, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins finishing first, the Tampa Bay Lightning finishing second, and the Columbus Blue Jackets finishing third. So all Eastern Conference teams. All right, Nino, go ahead.
Wow, okay. I'm going to put the Tampa Bay Lightning as my first overall team, and then the Nashville Predators in second, and the Edmonton Oilers coming in at third.
I have the Pittsburgh Penguins as my first place team. I have the Minnesota Wild as my second place team, and I have the Edmonton Oilers as my third place team.
For me, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins at number 1, I have the Lightning at 2, and the Oilers at 3.
All right, so let's talk about the Oilers a little bit here. We were talking earlier about it, and I said that I didn't care for how their top six looks as much as I love that they have McDavid and Draisaitl, obviously. It does make me feel confident about them. As far as it looks right now, they have Maroon, Lucic, and Caggiula all in that top six, and Ryan Strome instead of Jordan Eberle this year. That doesn't really make me feel too good about the Oilers' depth, I guess I would say.
Yeah, you can say that, but I mean, the way I look at it is with Connor McDavid, a comparable player to Sidney Crosby, you're going to be able to throw any guy next to him and have him put up points and play well. Patrick Maroon last year had 28 goals, had a career year for him. All the guys around him played great. He took Draisaitl next to him, made him a superstar. I understand that you have worries about the depth in there, but I still think that they're going to push to a top 3 spot, especially with where they finished last year.
Also, when you have a top-fledged goalie like Cam Talbot, I mean, he can keep you in a lot of games, even when you don't have a lot of depth. So I think with Draisaitl, a guy that just signed to like a big contract, you think he's going to probably want to prove that he's worth it. So I think he's going to have a big season, as well as, adding a guy like Talbot, who's probably going to have another monster year. I think they'll go really deep into the playoffs.
Oh, for sure. I guess it's up for debate how deep you think they'll go in the playoffs, or if they can get to were they in the conference finals last year? Or did they go out in the second round?
They were a goalie interference call away from going into the conference finals.
Yeah,
they were. They lost in Game 7 to the Anaheim Ducks in, I believe, the divisional rounds.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Again, their defense is a little suspect still with Sekera being out. I don't know. Darnell Nurse is coming into his own, as you've said before, mentioned. What I'm trying to say is you're going to need McDavid, Draisaitl, and Talbot to shoulder a lot of weight on that team. And not that they can't do it, but the lack of depth, I couldn't put them in my top 3. I guess they could for sure end up in there. They have the talent just with those 3 players alone. But I don't know if they can push that far during the season and finish strong enough to keep them up there.
The way they finished last year, finished on a very strong note. Connor McDavid being the player he is, growing into another year, is going to be his third year of hockey, and that's usually the year a lot of players boom. I know he had 100 points last year, but still think he can absolutely improve on that. I think Draisaitl is going to have another career year. And yeah, I can definitely see Talbot putting up the same numbers again. When you go to talk about the defense, Sekera is going to be out for an extended period of time, but don't forget about guys like Larson that are also back there. They definitely don't have the best core in the league, but they definitely have a good one who I think with the offense and the offensive talent they have, it shouldn't be a problem for them.
Now, Tom, I also wanted to ask, why do you have the Minnesota Wild finishing second? I thought that was a pretty cool pick.
I got the Wild finishing second because Joel Eriksson EK will be playing the whole year. So, I mean, that makes them deeper down the middle. Even losing Scandella, their back end didn't take too big of a hit. They still got Dumba, Brodin, Suter. They still got all those guys.
I definitely think that Dumba getting better and better made Scandella somewhat expendable. And they do have Jared Spurgeon. So I definitely think that Scandella became somewhat expendable, and they did acquire some offensive depth in Ennis and Foligno, which was needed. But we know, living in Buffalo, that those two have had their scoring woes over the past couple seasons. They certainly won't provide a ton of offense, but it's definitely good for them to have that depth that they kind of lacked.
And again, when you have a goalie like Devin Dubnyk, he's probably going to keep you in a lot of games, if not win you a lot of games this year. So, I mean,
especially behind the defense.
Especially, yes, exactly. Especially behind that defensive core. I mean, a guy like Dubnyk can really take you far.
I honestly think that they should have beaten St. Louis last year in the playoffs. They just didn't put the puck in the net, you know?
Well, they ran into a red-hot Jake Allen.
Yeah.
As long as Dubnyk can stay having a strong year throughout the full year, then they definitely could be up there. He did sputter off at the end of last season.
Near the end of last year, he did definitely have a fall off. But if he can come into next year, put up the numbers he did beforehand, and then have them ride a hot streak into the playoffs, it could definitely be a team that goes far.
And then let's touch on the Tampa Bay Lightning just a little bit. We all think that they're going to be fantastic this season. You have Stamkos back, along with Kucherov, who exploded last season. They have a ton of offensive depth, good defense led by Victor Hedman, and as long as Vasilevsky can continue to get better and be consistent, they should be right up there.
Yeah, I definitely think Vasilevsky is going to find more consistency this year. At the beginning of the year last year with Bishop, he was playing, I think, every 2 games, Vasilevsky would start the third. And he just really kind of struggled to find the consistency going throughout the year. So I think with him as the first starter, it shouldn't be a problem with them. And then going back to the defense, I mean, Victor Hedman might be one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL. Put up around 60 points last year. Plays as good in his own zone as anybody. And to go along with him is also Anton Strawman.
I have that same reasoning for why I have them at number 1. The fact that they came close to sniffing a playoff spot last year after having just such an injury-riddled season. You lose guys like Stamkos and Tyler Johnson for extended periods of time. I mean, that's just going to hurt. You lose 2 guys like that, that's just going to impact your team in a very negative way. So the fact that they became, 1 point out of a playoff spot?
Yeah, they finished 1 point out last year.
Exactly. It's insane, the depth that they have, and especially adding guys like Kunitz. And, I think Sergachev is going to make the team. I think he's going to make the team, and I think he's going to be a prominent player this year.
I don't know if he could be an impact player right away. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, it's fine. No problem.
I think he'll be a guy probably playing on the bottom 6 pairing. I think in the next couple years, he will absolutely be an impact player for the team. Definitely will be a great 1-2 punch with him and Hedman at the helm.
Oh, 100%.
But this year, I just don't know if I can see him being super impactful.
I don't know if he'll make the starting roster, but I think you'll see him definitely creep into that bottom pairing by mid-season. He played well in the few games that he played with Montreal last season, and most of the NHL analysts I've seen are fairly impressed with him. And it's mainly Tampa's depth that keeps him out of the lineup right now, but he'll be a nice call-up. All right, let's move on to the bottom 3 predictions. Let's send it over to Nino to start this one off.
All right. My worst team in the NHL, I have the Vancouver Canucks, followed by the Detroit Red Wings, and the Colorado Avalanche coming in at 3rd.
Wow. All right, Tom?
I agree with you on the bottom 3 teams. I got Detroit finishing last, Vancouver finishing 2nd last, and then Colorado 3rd last.
For me, I'm going to have the Vegas Golden Knights finishing last, the Vancouver Canucks 2nd last, and the Colorado Avalanche 3rd last.
And for my bottom 3, I have the Colorado Avalanche, the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Detroit Red Wings. So I have Colorado finishing as my last team. I think that they are no better than they were last season, aside from having Tyson Jost and Mikko Rantanen coming into his 2nd year. Nathan McKinnon might have a big year, but I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel as of right now.
Yeah, especially with Matt Duchene. The imminent loss of him on the horizon definitely isn't going to bode well for the team.
Yeah, I just kind of want to get into the Vancouver Canucks. I just have a lot to say about them. I mean, I picked them as my last place team, and a lot of people don't even have them in the bottom 3 that I've looked at, like on NHL.com and everything like that. but I just see an aging pair of twins in the Sedins. And then, I mean, think about this. When your best guy is Bo Horvat, when your best offensive player at the moment is Bo Horvat, it's just not...
He's not bad, though. He's a good playmaker.
But listen, you're not going to win like many games at all if Bo Horvat is your number one center.
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
He's certainly a good young piece, and they do have Brock Besser, but apparently Jake Virtanen has looked really good, too, coming into this year.
Yeah, Brock Besser's looked great in the preseason as well. And, I mean, to go back to Bo Horvat, I mean, the guy put up 20 goals, 32 assists last year for 52 points on an awful team. So
is that first-line center, though? Is that a first-line center on any other team in the league?
No, it's not.
Not
He's
right
also
now.
22 years old, so...
I just don't see it. I don't see him doing any more than he did last year, especially with the cast that he has around him. And their goalie situation is Markstrom their starting goalie right now?
Yes. Former Sabre Anders Nilsson backing him up.
I mean, the goalie situation isn't that great. It's just not looking good for them.
Yeah, I just want to argue that on that Bo Horvat thing, though. I mean, with Brock Besser playing next to him, I think he could absolutely put up a couple more assists.
Yeah, it could be a fairly good line. I think they'll be okay, but they were certainly a bottom 3 candidate for me.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing as you mentioned with Brock Besser playing on his right wing now. I think Horvat will definitely put up more points than he did last year.
They definitely have some good young pieces, but again, another team that lacks a lot of depth and certainly not a off-the-board pick for bottom 3. Let's talk about the Vegas Golden Knights this season. The expansion team coming in, they do have Marc-Andre Fleury, which is awesome. It's going to give those new fans something to watch, but expansion level talent will hold them back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, besides guys like Neal and Marchessault and Fleury, it's basically a team of fourth liners.
Right. And Marchessault, you have analysts like Mike Kelly saying that he's just a guy who scored 30 goals, not a 30-goal scorer. It's very unlikely he even comes close to that this season.
Yeah, especially he's not going to be playing even near close to the talent he had with Barkov and Huberdeau in Florida, so I totally believe it.
And don't get me wrong, I had them very close to putting them in my bottom 3, but I just, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs or anything. I'm not even thinking they're going to sniff the playoffs, but I just think that they're not going to finish, bottom 3. I think they'll probably be like right outside, maybe like 4 or 5 in the Western Conference, especially with Fleury and net. If you have a stable goaltender, he can still steal you some wins.
Right, and if you look at most of those bottom 5 teams, or bottom 3 really, their goaltending is pretty awful, which is what sticks them there.
Exactly. I mean, when you're looking at the Red Wings, I mean, their goalie situation is okay. It could be a lot better, but they don't have a Marc-Andre Fleury on their team. I mean, Peter Mrazek and Jamie Howard and Colorado Avalanche, their goalie situation is just a black hole. I mean, Semyon Varlamov is just so inconsistent year in and year out. And then behind him you have, who's even their backup? Because they lost their backup to Vegas.
Yeah, they just signed Jonathan Bernier. I believe they signed him in free agency. They didn't acquire him by trade. So I think Jonathan Bernier is a fairly serviceable backup. He's not terrible. He's been a starter in the past. And I think their goaltending will be better than it was last year, but certainly not enough to overcome their lack of depth. Like Minchin was saying when we were talking before the podcast, they have a bottom 6 that's pretty much comprised of players that should be in the AHL right now. And then let's move to the Detroit Red Wings. Unfortunately, last season, the first time in 25 years that they've missed the playoffs, which is unbelievable. Another team where in the NHL depth is super important and they just don't have it. They've got a couple young pieces in Larkin and Mantha, but that defense is starting to get pretty barren and they're having a rough time at goaltender right now, hoping Peter Mrazek can become the guy. I
am very, very down on the Detroit Red Wings. I mean, they are in cap hell, to say the least. Thomas Tatar is making $5.3 million a season. Right. I mean, if that doesn't tell you much about their cap situation, nothing else will, because, I mean, it's not good. They right now on Cap Friendly are projected 0 cap room for this upcoming season, which is going to make it even harder to sign Anthony Ciu, which is another young guy which would be dearly missed if they lost him to the KHL.
Anthony Ciu, I feel like he's a bit of an overrated player considering some of the highlight reel, goals that he's scored that have put him on the map. But he's certainly not a player that you want to lose because he's not asking a ton of money. And considering that Tatar contract was just signed, that's going to be one that probably bites him in the ass in a few years. Okay, and let's move on to our next segment. We're going to go to most improved and biggest drop-off teams in the league. Minchin, you can start this one off.
All right, so for the most improved team, I'm going to have the Dallas Stars, and then for the team that I think is going to take the biggest fall, I'm putting the Washington Capitals.
So my biggest improved team is going to be the Dallas Stars, like mentioned, but my biggest drop-off team is going to be the Ottawa Senators.
Nino, I'm right with you. I have the Dallas Stars as my most improved team, and I have the Ottawa Senators as my biggest drop-off.
My biggest improved team is the Dallas Stars, and my biggest drop-off team is going to be the Chicago Blackhawks.
Okay, let's talk about the Dallas Stars, since we all have them as our most improved team for this season.
Oh, yeah. Well, the addition of Radulov is obviously huge for that top line. I mean, when you have a line consisting of Sagan, Jamie Benn, and Radulov, I mean, it's just going to be insane this year. They're going to put up a ton of points. The addition of Ben Bishop is going to be huge for them, considering the goaltending that they had last year. Mark Mathot, he's going to be a solid defenseman on that back end, especially with a guy like Klingberg. I think those two will mesh very well together. They added a bunch of depth, and I just love the way that they're going to go into this season, especially with Ken Hitchcock at the helm.
Yeah, and I just want to add that while goaltending was atrocious for them last year, and they did struggle on defense, I think last year for them was just a strange year in general. Even with the team they had with the goaltending, I don't think there's any way they should have finished in the bottom 10, and I think this year they're definitely going to show that they're a top 10 team.
I think it was the goaltending mainly that kept them out of there. The defense didn't play great, but they had by far the worst goaltending in the league, and that's amazing considering you have the Colorado Avalanche in the same league as you, and they had Semyon Varlamov and Calvin Pickard, both of which played awful last season. Varlamov is one of the most inconsistent goaltenders I've ever seen, and yet you have Lehtinen and Niemi, who played in Dallas last year and couldn't stop a beach ball.
Yeah, they had two of the worst starters in the league on the same team, which is just amazing. They couldn't find competent goaltending.
Not at all. That's certainly what kept them out of the playoffs. It's what got Lindy Ruff fired, which is unfortunate. I didn't really, as much as I think that Ken Hitchcock is a great hire for that team, it's really going to fix their biggest problem, which is keeping the puck out of the net. I didn't think it was fair to Lindy Ruff how he got fired, considering it had to be on Jim Nill, their GM. The defense lacked depth, and the goaltending was the worst in the league. This season, though, they now have Ben Bishop, who I firmly believe is still one of the best goaltenders in the league. Probably makes my top 5, to be honest with you. I think he's going to be a huge improvement for them this season, and he fits well in Ken Hitchcock's system.
And while we're on the topic of the Stars, I just want to send out our condolences. One of their broadcaster of many years now, Dave Strader, he recently passed away due to cancer. So anybody that's listening, he was very good, so he will be missed.
Yeah, they definitely had an awesome guy in Dave Strader. He's pretty much a legend as far as commentary goes in the NHL, and it sucks to see him go the way he did. But let's move on. We're going to go to the biggest drop-off teams, why we think that they're going to do worse this season. And we'll start off with the Ottawa Senators, though. I think that despite how great last season was, that Craig Anderson story was phenomenal. But this season, it's hard to see them repeat. I don't see them making it that far in the playoffs, even if they do make it. And I don't know if they will make it. It's certainly an uphill battle. They have Karlsson, who's probably going to miss the first couple weeks of the season or so. They say he'll only miss the home opener, or that's all he's slated to miss right now. But I certainly think he'll miss a few more games just to make sure he's healthy. They lose Mark Mathot, who was a great defenseman for that team, as underrated as he is. And despite the fact that they have Thomas Chabot coming in, who is going to be pretty good for them, we saw him at the World Juniors, and he was really good. I doubt they're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, but going back to the whole Chabot thing, he was actually sent down, I believe, a day or two ago, actually, so he won't be on the starting roster.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which even puts them more at hurt with defense without Mark Mathot.
Wow, yeah. I didn't hear about that.
Wow, I thought he was going to come in and maybe play with Karlsson and hopefully learn with the best defenseman in the league. Wow, that's a big hit to them, I think. I don't know what they're going to do on defense. I know they have Cody Ceci or
yeah, it's Ceci.
Ceci, right. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't think that they have the depth on defense or on offense to compete. They have Zach Smith in their top 6 right now. Jean-Gabriel Pageau is their second-line center. They have a lot of question marks. Bobby Ryan only having 25 points, I believe it was, in 62 games last year, which is a massive drop-off from his previous production. I think it's going to be tough for them this season.
I have the Blackhawks in as my biggest drop-off, mainly because of their defensive core. I just don't know if it'll be able to hold up, and they're going to have to rely a lot on Corey Crawford this year, and this is going to be a big test for him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think with the defensemen they've lost in the offseason, I believe Roosevelt's gone. They lost Trevor Van Riemsdyk in the expansion draft. Nick Leddy's in New York. I don't think that Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook are just going to be able to take that entire load. And especially questions with Corey Crawford. I know he's been called an elite goalie in the past, but this is definitely going to be a proving year for him with the lack of defense he has in front of him.
Yeah, and also you didn't mention the loss of Hjalmarsson to the Coyotes.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's also a very big loss, and their backup goalie, they lost Scott Darling, one of the best backup goalies in the league. So now they're just going to have, I don't even know who their backup is right now, to be honest.
Right now, it's Anton Forsberg, who is a former backup in Columbus.
That's a big step down from a guy like Scott Darling, who could come in and you'd be confident for him to win you games if you're a Chicago Blackhawks fan.
Right, considering right now, I would assume most people coming into the season have him slated as a middling starter in the league. He's probably between that 10 and 20 spot, depending on who you talk to among the goaltenders in the league. It's absolutely a huge loss, but it certainly puts a ton of pressure on Corey Crawford. He gets a lot of flack over the last few seasons for basically riding the coattails of a great team, but he's put up good enough stats and played well enough to be considered a good goalie in his own right, and we'll see this season if he can back that up.
Yeah, and then on top of that, the forward group, obviously you bring Saad back, who's a great player. Hopefully you can spark up Taves, but I think the loss of Marian Hossa this year, and especially Artemi Panarin, are definitely going to put the team at a hurt when it comes to scoring goals.
Let's move on to our next segment, which will be our award winners.
My Art Ross pick is Connor McDavid. My Rocket Richard is Patrick Laine. My Calder is going to be Charlie McAvoy. My Vezina is going to be Cam Talbot. My Norris is going to be Erik Karlsson. Selke is going to be Bergeron. And Jack Adams is going to be Ken Hitchcock.
All right, yeah, for me, I'm going to have the Art Ross being Connor McDavid, and then I'm going to have Nikita Kucherov winning the Maurice Richard. I have Nico Hischier winning the Calder, Erik Karlsson winning the Norris, Matt Murray winning the Vezina, Bergeron winning the Selke, and Hitchcock winning the Jack Adams.
I have Connor McDavid winning the Art Ross as well, Nikita Kucherov winning the Rocket Richard, Clayton Keller winning the Calder, Patrice Bergeron winning the Selke, Carey Price winning the Vezina, Erik Karlsson winning the Norris, and Ken Hitchcock winning the Jack Adams.
And my Art Ross, surprise, is Connor McDavid. Rocket Richard is going to be Jamie Benn. My Calder is Nico Hischier. The Selke is Anze Kopitar. The Vezina will be Cam Talbot. The Norris is PK Subban. And the Jack Adams goes to Ken Hitchcock.
Okay, before we get to anything, I don't think we're really going to need to touch on why we picked Connor McDavid for the Art Ross.
Not even close. Guy's going to win it by a mile, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just to let you guys know, we do want you to comment and leave your thoughts on here. If you disagree or agree, whatever you think, we'd love to hear it. If anyone thinks that Connor McDavid won't win the Art Ross, you certainly won't be scrutinized. It's an open forum for you to talk. And we'll just leave it at that. Let's get to the Rocket Richard, though. I have Nikita Kucherov winning that because you have Steven Stamkos coming back this season, who is only going to open up more space for Kucherov on the ice, considering I think most people will still hone in on Stamkos as the top player on that offense.
Yeah, and even if they don't put Kucherov and Stamkos on the same line, you can absolutely divide those two out. And I mean, take the numbers that Kucherov put up last year. I believe 40 goals, 45 assists for 85 points. Put that on a second-line player, I could absolutely see him putting up 45 or more.
Well, yeah, I have Jamie Benn because for the reason I said earlier. I mean, he's going to be on that line with Tyler Seguin and Alexander Radulov. I just think that he's always been, good for at least 40 goals in his NHL career so far. I mean, I think he's just going to have an awesome year, especially on this team that is going to be very offensively powered. I think they're going to have a lot of points, and I think a lot of those goals are just going to fall right to him.
Yeah, and I think a huge part of that is going to be Dallas's power play. You're talking Sagan, Benn, Radulov, Klingberg, and possibly Spezza all out there at the same time. It's probably going to be a top 3 power play in the league.
Exactly. I think that Jamie Benn is going to really benefit from this offensive explosion that the Dallas Stars are going to have this year.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I got Laine as mine. One reason because of their power play. I mean, he's going to be playing with Ehlers, Scheifele, Wheeler, and Byfuglien on the power play, and he's going to be the shoot first option on that power play.
He's going to be unbelievable this year. I had him as my second pick for the Rocket Richard. I really liked him this season, and it was so tough for me to pick Kucherov instead. But I do think that Kucherov's supporting cast, as good as Laine's will be, especially on the power play, like Tom said, I think Kucherov's supporting cast just gives him a little bit of an edge there, but it'll be a close race. You'll see a few guys up there, actually, and like Nino said, Jamie Benn, I think, is a great pick considering his previous performances of the last few seasons. He's had 35 goals, 41 goals, and then past season, a little bit of a downturn there with 26 goals, but it was certainly an outlier for how Dallas Dallas normally performs, how explosive their offense usually is, and I think he'll have a great bounce-back year. And with Radulov being on that line, he'll certainly produce even more than usual because he's not just playing with Tyler Seguin.
All right. I picked Nico Hischier to get the Calder this year, and just because I don't know, I haven't seen him play that much. I don't know that much about him. I just know from every indication that I've heard, he's been looking very, very powerful. He actually scored like a really nice goal against Washington the other night in the preseason. I just think that, the forward group over there in New Jersey is going to help him out a lot. I think that he is going to have a pretty big season offensively, and that should win him the Calder.
Yeah, he's definitely right up there. He was my second guy behind Clayton Keller, but we'll stay on Nico Hischier for a second here. I think that if he plays with Taylor Hall, you're going to have a hard time beating him out for the Calder because that will be a fast line, and Taylor Hall will finally have a explosive playmaker to play with, and it would be a dynamic duo for sure. Hischier could certainly put up 50 to 60 points if that's what it shakes out to be. I have Clayton Keller, though, because I think they will put Nico Hischier on that second-line center spot, and I don't know how much he'll play with Taylor Hall. Hopefully that you do see them together. But Clayton Keller, it looks like right now, is going to be playing on the wing with Max Domi and Derek Stepan. Stepan is a good, solid center. And then you have another explosive guy who's actually similar to Clayton Keller's play style in Max Domi on the other side. I think that line's going to be quick, and Clayton Keller is a dynamic playmaker. I think people are really going to be surprised at how good he is coming into this season, and he's actually been a lot of people's pick to win the Calder, more so, I think, than anyone else. And it's for that reason that he'll be playing with Domi and Stepan, and he's looked so good playing in the World Juniors, and he looks like an unbelievable prospect right now.
The big reason I got Charlie McAvoy is, he stepped in last year in the playoffs against a very hot Ottawa team and averaged 26 minutes of ice time per game, and he had 3 points in 6 games.
Yeah, and you did see Zach Werenski compete for the Calder last season, I think it was.
Yeah,
and
last season.
Yeah, and he played big minutes for them and put up good numbers, and he was right up there. So certainly McAvoy, if he's a workhorse this year and he can put up points for them and be somewhat of a quarterback on the power play, because that looks like that'll be his role, he could definitely compete for that spot. And we haven't seen a defenseman win the Calder since, I believe, Tyler Myers in 2010.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
no,
a
we
blast from
haven't.
the past.
Yeah.
No, we haven't. But I think this could definitely be the year for Charlie McAvoy. I'm looking at it. Zach Werenski had 47 points last year, but you have to think that he was in a Calder race with guys like, I believe, William Nylander, Marner, Austin Matthews. This year, you're not really having that superstar generational talent to go with it. If you see McAvoy put up similar numbers to Werenski, I think he could absolutely take it.
All right, and let's move on to the Selke. So for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most do who are listening, the Selke goes to the best two-way player in the game, two-way forward in the game. I have Patrice Bergeron as my pick because he is so responsible with the puck, and I believe easily the best forward in his own zone in the NHL right now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I believe Bergeron's won the trophy the past 2 or 3 years in a row. It's basically a lock for him at this point. He's just so good in his own zone.
Yeah, I had Anze Kopitar winning it. I don't know. I just think that, he is very responsible in his own zone. He is a very good two-way player. He's won it before. He's always in the contention for winning it. So, I just thought, why not steer away from Patrice Bergeron? He's won it for so many years in a row now. I think it's time to give it to somebody else, and I don't think there's anybody better to give it to than Anze Kopitar.
Yeah, I think Anze Kopitar is going to have a good year. However, that LA Kings team does look fairly depleted as far as their forwards go. And I don't know if their defense is going to be as strong as usual this season anyways. We saw a little bit of that last year, and it's why you saw Daryl Sutter lose his job. They ultimately lost a lot of depth due to their former GM, Dean Lombardi. I don't know. I think Anze Kopitar is so much better than he played last season, what his stats were last season. But I don't know if the team around him is good enough for him to be able to win that Selke.
Yeah, and with Anze Kopitar, I don't think his line mates are going to be too much of a help for him either. I believe he's going to be playing with Johnny Brzezinski, and who is it?
Dustin Brown.
And Dustin Brown, so I don't think he's really going to get too much help on that front.
Certainly going to be handicapped a little bit this season with Pearson and Toffoli. They're two best wingers, in my opinion, both playing with Jeff Carter. It's going to be a bit of a one-man stand for Anze Kopitar this year on that line. All right, let's move on to the Vezina Trophy. This year, I have Carey Price taking the Vezina home because he's probably the consensus best goalie in the league. I mean, if you ask most people who the best goaltender is, they're definitely going to say Carey Price. I'm sure you'll get some Braden Holtbys or Bobrovskys, but it's mainly going to be Carey Price. He can anchor that team. He'll probably lead them into a playoff spot. And anytime they look like they have depth issues, their offense isn't producing, it seems like Carey Price comes and saves the day. And for that reason, I actually had him over Matt Murray as my Vezina pick.
Yeah, the reason I had Matt Murray over Carey Price for the Vezina is I understand that Carey Price is the best goalie in the league, but typically what happens is the Vezina award goes to one of the best teams in the league, and I don't think Montreal is going to do too great this year. With the way I think Pittsburgh is going to play, they're going to be right at the top of the standings. Matt Murray is going to be leading that charge with 40-plus wins, and I think it's going to be hard not to give it to him.
Yeah, I totally agree with you in the sense that the Vezina doesn't always go to the best goalie in the league. It goes to the best team in the league. And by saying I think that Cam Talbot is winning the Vezina, I don't think at all that he is any better than Carey Price. I just think that his team will have a better season, and if he can lead them, if he can have top 10 numbers, top 5 numbers, and lead them to a playoff spot, and maybe get them deep into the playoffs, I think he will definitely win the Vezina this year, especially with the team that he's got around him.
I 100% agree with you, Nino.
All right, let's move on to the Norris Trophy. I have Erik Karlsson winning it this year. I think you can never go wrong with Erik Karlsson as your Norris pick. He's probably the best defenseman in the league, and despite Burns winning it last year and Drew Doughty winning it the year before, Erik Karlsson seems to always be right there as that second candidate, and I think if Ottawa's going to get to the playoffs this year, Erik Karlsson's going to have to be a big part of that.
Yeah, I have PK Subban as my Norris winner. I think last year was a little bit of an adjustment year for him, going from Montreal over to Nashville. I mean, he still put up some decent numbers, but, not like we've been used to seeing PK Subban put up for the past couple of years. I think this year is actually absolutely going to explode. That defensive core looks as strong as ever. Who is his defensive partner at the moment? Josi. I mean, PK Subban and Roman Josi, that is a deadly pair on defense. I mean, I think that he's going to have an amazing offensive year. I think he is one of the best in the league in his own zone, and I think he's going to prove to everybody that he is one of the top defensemen in the league like he should be.
Yeah, but, that's the thing. There's almost too many guys back there to produce,
Yeah, I think that's part of it, but I think also PK Subban has enough talent to show on his own that he is above the rest of those guys and that he is the dominant force on that defensive front.
I think Yossi's just as good as him, if not better.
I think that a lot of NHL analysts actually would agree that Josi is probably the best defenseman on that team, but it's probably PK Subban's pure offensive ability that could put him up there. If he can play well on defense like he normally does and still put up in the 60 points range, which is right around his norm, I think he could be right there for the Norris Trophy.
Yeah, and just like Ryan, I had to go with Erik Karlsson here. I understand Brett Burns had a great year last year. I believe he put up somewhere around 60, 70 points. But at the end of the day, Erik Karlsson is the best defenseman in the league. As you saw in the playoffs last year in that series versus Pittsburgh, he can completely impact the game. He's a game changer on the back end, and he's a guy who can also put up 80 points a year for you. Even with him missing time, potentially almost a month, I still think he's a guy who will take it.
All right, we're going to move on to our Jack Adams Award winners. I think we're all going to mostly agree on this one. I have Ken Hitchcock just because this award usually goes to the team that either improves the most over last year or the team that, comes out of nowhere. Nobody expected to be good, but, becomes good, like John Tortorella last year with the Columbus Blue Jackets. I mean, nobody expected that team to be good, and they finished top 3 in their division, so he won that award. I just think Ken Hitchcock is going to do a great job this year with a stellar offensive unit and a revamped defensive unit, especially with Ben Bishop on the back end. I think that he's going to lead that team very deep into the playoffs, and he's going to get the Jack Adams.
Exactly. I have Ken Hitchcock winning the award for that same reason. I have John Tortorella competing there, even though I'm not the biggest John Tortorella fan. I think he's really kind of changed his style over the past couple seasons, and it's really worked for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And if they do finish in the top 3 like I have them doing, he could definitely be right there with Ken Hitchcock. But again, like Nino said, they usually give the award to the biggest jump team, the team that makes the biggest improvement, and that's Ken Hitchcock this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree with you that John Tortorella is a great coach and everything, but with the way that Columbus played last year and with the way they're probably going to finish again, I just couldn't see them giving it to a guy like that who's already put up a great season in the past, whose team will probably have another 100-plus points. If I had to pick anybody for that award, I think I would choose Mike Babcock out of Toronto. I think the team's going to probably finish top 2 in their division. I think they're going to be a team that could potentially go for the 100-point range, especially with the way their rookies played last year and will this year.
So you do have Mike Babcock winning the award then?
No, I don't. I'm just saying that if there's another guy who I think could come close to competing with Hitchcock, I think it's absolutely Babcock.
Now let's move on to our next segment. we're going to go to our 3 boomers. These are 3 players that each of us have picked who will have a big season. Maybe it's a bounce back year, maybe it's a breakout year. It can be a group of different things, but we're going to pick guys who we can ride or die with this season, who may be flying under the radar a little bit, or maybe people aren't looking at, who will have a surprising season. I'm going to start it off here and give my 3 picks in Jeff Skinner, Jake Gensel, and Nikolai Ehlers, who is my number 1 guy for this segment. I really think he's going to have a good year.
I am going with Dylan Larkin, Anze Kopitar, and my biggest guy that I think is going to improve a lot over last year is Corey Perry.
I'm going with Evgeny Kuznetsov, Philip Forsberg, and Claude Giroux.
Yeah, and for my 3, I have Johnny Gaudreau, Jack Eichel, and then I think the biggest guy who's going to improve this year is going to be John Tavares. Just to touch on that a little bit, he's going into a contract year. He's looking at all the guys getting around the league making $11, $12 million, and he knows he can be one of those guys. He only put up 66 points last year, but I think this is definitely a year he's going to go out and prove it. I think the Islanders are going to tailor to specifically meet his needs. He's going to be playing on a line with Anders Lee and Jordan Eberle all year. He's definitely a guy I could see reaching 80-plus point range.
I think them acquiring Jordan Eberle is going to be a big thing for them. He'll have somebody who can really play on his line and compete at a high level, which will be the first time probably since Okposo. They've had a couple of guys come in who are serviceable, but he hasn't had that true number 2 guy in the line who he can count on for a lot of production. I think Eberle will be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but you got to give Anders Lee credit as well. A guy put up 34 goals last year for a total of 52 points in 81 games. On that line with him as well, he could definitely put up that same number again.
He's certainly a good goal scorer coming out of Notre Dame. He's got some great scoring talent. He's great around the net. And definitely both of those guys are going to help out Tavares a lot. Now, let's move on to Nino, who was talking about Corey Perry.
Yeah, I have Corey Perry. I mean, only 19 goals last season. That is unheard of for a guy with Corey Perry's status. I don't know. I just don't know. I think last year was just a down year for him. I don't know. I think that offensively he was just in a lot of woes last year. 53 points only. I think this upcoming season he's going to regain his confidence. I mean, especially after the playoff run that he had last year. I think he's going to be back up in the high 20s for goals and obviously more than 53 points this year. I think he's going to have an amazing offensive year this year.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Anaheim is going to be right up there with the top teams in the league as well. They're my pick, actually, to finish first in the division, which we'll get to later. But I think he'll have a bounce-back year for sure. You don't see Corey Perry only getting 19 goals regularly. He's taken a bit of a step back from his prime goal-scoring days, and him and Getzlaf used to put up a lot of points together. But this year, it looks like they've finally gotten that line back together, and he could certainly have a great bounce-back year.
Yeah, and just to touch on this before we move on to the next segment, I know we're a bunch of Buffalo guys and we're supposed to keep the show unbiased, but I do think a really good unbiased pick here is Jack Eichel. Now, hear me out here. The guy finished with 56 points in 61 games last year after suffering an ankle sprain, which bummed out his ankle for the entire season, had it taped up. And don't be surprised if this kid puts up 85 points this year. He's going to be on the number 1 power play in the league. He's going to be the guy leading the team. And a fun fact that a lot of people might know, in the last 42 games of the regular season, Eichel actually outscored Connor McDavid and was the player who put up the most points in the entire NHL. So don't be surprised if this kid comes out and puts up insane numbers this year.
Please don't take that as a ringing endorsement that he's better than Connor McDavid.
No, absolutely not. I'm not trying to say that at all, but I'm saying he could put up not similar numbers, but he could kind of put up into that 85-point range.
He'll certainly be right up there. He's going to have a fantastic year, and that comes out of us going to preseason games, and we're going to be honest, he hasn't looked that great in the preseason. Not that we're worried. It's really just to get the legs fresh. You have teams like the Colorado Avalanche who went 7-0 in the preseason last year, and we know how that ended. The Buffalo Sabres didn't do well this preseason, and neither did Jack Eichel, but that doesn't mean it's telling of the season. He's in a much better system this year with Phil Housley coaching that fits his game much better. And it's certainly not a stretch to have him right around that 80, 85 points mark. If he has an amazing year, he'll be up around 90 points, which would be awesome for us. Honestly, it would be great to watch. But I think it's certainly a well-grounded opinion to have him right around 85 points.
I mean, one of the big things that was overlooked last year, I think, was the fact that he came back from his high ankle sprain relatively early, and that hindered him for a long time. I mean, think about this. I mean, a high ankle sprain for a hockey player is one of the most devastating injuries you can have. I mean, it affects your strides, it affects your skating, it affects everything. Your shot. I mean, the guy just still put up unreal numbers. He was almost at a point per game pace last year, with most of the season being hindered by that ankle. With a full healthy season, I definitely think he could get up into that 85-point range.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people don't know that even into the later parts of the season when the Sabres are around 60, 70 games, he had that ankle taped up the whole time, every game.
Now let's go and touch on one of Tom's picks, Filip Forsberg. I really liked that one. I think he's going to have a great bounce back year. Tom, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Forsberg started off very slow last year. In the first, I think, 40 games, he just put up like 12 points or maybe like 18 or something like that. And then he really turned it on toward the end of the year. So this year, I'm just really looking forward to him just turning it on the whole entire year.
Yeah, I should know. I had him in fantasy hockey last year, which I don't value fantasy hockey over actually watching the league in general, obviously. I love just watching players play. I don't care if a guy is slow to start, if he comes out to a strong finish, whatever happens, it's a crapshoot in fantasy hockey. But it was absolutely gut-wrenching watching him in the first 40 games last year. You saw a lot of missed shots that would have been wide-open goals, which he would have never missed in the second half. You saw a lot of posts hit, a lot of opportunities missed, and it seemed like he really brought it together when that Arvidsson, Johansson, and Forsberg line came together about midway through the season, and they really hit their stride. He was probably the best player in the league over a 3-week period, right around that third of the way through the season. He was amazing. I believe he had something ridiculous like 14 goals in 10 games. It was some type of amazing stretch like that. And I think while that production is unsustainable, you'll see him have a really nice season this year. He'll have a more well-rounded season as far as production goes. Now, I just want to touch on my favorite pick, which was Nikolai Ehlers. He will be playing on that power play with Laine, Wheeler, Scheifele, Bufflin, and whoever else they put on that line. He's going to be fantastic this year, especially if he plays with Laine on that line with Scheifele. Even if they move him down to that second line with Perreault and Brian Little, he's still a fantastic player who scored 64 points last season, not playing with Laine most of the year. And this year, I really think he's going to get it done. If you just go on YouTube and watch Nikolai Ehlers' highlight reel, it's pretty ridiculous. The kid has explosive speed. He's a great passer, and he's got a wicked release on his shot. For all the credit that Laine gets for the release on his shot, well, that is up with Ovechkin. Ehlers is not far behind. He's got a great snapper, and I think you're going to see him put up a great season. I just do. I'm really confident in him. Now, let's move on to our playoff teams and wild card predictions. Tom, you want to start this one off?
Yeah, the first division we'll start with is the Metro. In the Metro, I got Pittsburgh, Washington, and Columbus. I got Pittsburgh finishing first, Columbus in second, and then Washington in third.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to have the Pittsburgh Penguins in number 1, the Columbus Blue Jackets number 2, and the Washington Capitals third.
I have the same thing. It really wasn't an arguable thing for me. I thought that was a pretty obvious order. I don't think the Washington Capitals are going to drop out of those top 3 spots, and Columbus is really going to come on strong this year.
Yeah, I also have the exact same thing, actually. Pittsburgh in first, Columbus in second, and then Washington in third.
All right, so while we're in the East, you guys want to talk about your Atlantic picks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go first here. For the Atlantic, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning finishing first, the Toronto Maple Leafs finishing second, and the Montreal Canadiens finishing third, primarily because of Carey Price.
Yeah, I have the same teams, just in a different order. I have the Tampa Bay Lightning finishing in first, the Montreal Canadiens finishing in second, and then the Toronto Maple Leafs in third.
I have the Tampa Bay Lightning finishing in first, the Ottawa Senators in second, and the Toronto Maple Leafs in third.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat with Ryan here with Tampa Bay at number 1, Toronto 2, and then Montreal 3.
Can we talk about how good Toronto is going to be this season? They're going to be really, really good with Nylander and Austin Matthews, just like last year. And you do have Marleau coming in, which I think that contract is going to be an eye roller in a couple seasons, but he is going to be a nice complement as a good scoring veteran with Matthews or Nylander, whichever line he plays on or gets moved to.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at that Marleau contract and think that with what he comes in, he's really not going to put up too much production and not going to be a great player. But he did put up great numbers last year. I mean, he put up 27 goals and 46 points, and I believe he was playing with Joe Thornton. Put him on a line with a guy like Matthews, who's probably going to be playing with Nylander, I could absolutely see him hitting 30.
Yeah, as much as it pains me to say it, I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to be very good for a very long time unless somehow that core of three, Marner, Nylander, and Matthews gets blown up because they all want a lot of money at some point. The Toronto Maple Leafs really scare me in the future. I think the Sabres are going to be right on their heels in the coming seasons, but the Toronto Maple Leafs are really a team to look out for.
Absolutely, and with Mike Babcock as their head coach, he's probably the best coach in the league. You have guys like Joel Quenneville up there, but Mike Babcock just seems to bring a different element to a team when he coaches. They play extremely fast. They're so good as far as possession goes. Also, you have Frederik Andersen, who looked really good last year in net after a bit of a rough start. I think Toronto is really going to turn it on next year. They might even challenge Tampa for the first spot in the division for a while, but I think in the end they'll finish second.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think they're going to be good, but I don't think they're going to come close to competing with Tampa. I mean, especially with the way Tampa's defense is looking right now with Victor Hedman at the helm. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Austin Matthews is a great player, but let's be real here. He is not even close to comparable to Stamkos's level. I think they're going to be a good team, but I just don't think they can challenge Tampa for that number one spot.
Yeah, I have them in third place just because of their defensive depth. I mean, Morgan Rielly and Nikita Zaitsev are two very good defensemen, but they are just not at the level of Victor Hedman and Anton Stralman at this moment.
And especially Victor Hedman being the big one, he anchors that defense, and he put up 72 points last year, which led the league for defensemen. He is really going to challenge for the Norris this year. I'm surprised one of us didn't pick him, but I'm sure he was a top candidate for all of us. He was for me. I know that. They're going to be great this year. What I meant when I said they're going to challenge Tampa this year for that first spot is the Toronto Maple Leafs tend to go on these powerful surges during the season where it seems like they're unbeatable. They just play a puck possession game similar to how Detroit was when they were in their prime with Babcock coaching. That's why I have them so high. Now, let's talk about Tom's pick for second in the Atlantic with the Ottawa Senators, because I know a couple of us had them as our biggest drop-off team, but Tom, you're pretty confident in them?
I meant to say Toronto as my second and Ottawa as third, but I still have Ottawa in that division spot. Carlson's just so good. Anderson played incredibly good last year. And then, I mean, their top line is still pretty damn good, so.
They are definitely a good team. I just think that the depth issues will kill them if they have any type of injury trouble. I don't think you can rely on Mike Condon to play as well over an extended period of games like he did last year. He played 40, and I believe he still had a .911 save percentage, which is pretty good for a backup to come in and play over that amount of time. I don't know. I don't think that Ottawa will be up there this season. I think if they do make it, it's going to be as a wild card.
All right, let's move it on to the wild card predictions. I guess I'll start this one. For my wild card, I have the first slot going to the New York Rangers and the second team, the Boston Bruins.
Nino, I'm right with you. I have the same exact thing.
Yeah, I actually have the Rangers at number 1 too, but for the number 2 spot, I'm going with the Buffalo Sabres.
Wow, there we go.
I got the Montreal Canadiens as the number 1 spot and the Buffalo Sabres as the number 2.
Okay, so we got a couple of Sabres picks here. It was so tough for me to leave them out of the playoffs, especially since how Botterill has improved the team. I really like what he's done with the defense, and I think Anapin is going to be a great addition on the back end. I just don't think that their forwards are quite deep enough yet, and unless you get a really big season out of Robin Lehner, who I am confident in still, I know a lot of people rag on him. He still had a .920 save percentage on a not-so-great team last year. And with a better defense, I think he'll really do even better this season. But I don't think it'll be quite enough to put them into the playoff spot.
So the way I like to look at it, going into the bye week, the Sabres were actually 1 point out of a playoff spot. And at that point, it looked like the players really lost the attention of Dan Bylsma, and they just kind of took a huge skid, which I don't think is going to happen this year. Players seem to be connecting more with Phil Housley. There are obviously the additions to defense. Scandella is looking great, Boyu's looking great, and so is Antipin. And I think that the forward group, especially with a healthy Eichel and Ryan O'Reilly taking less minutes, will be able to put up the points to lead them to that wild card spot.
I just think that the Boston Bruins are still good enough to keep the Sabres out of that wild card spot, and I don't see the Ottawa Senators as a better team this year than the New York Rangers, despite Henrik Lundqvist's recent decrease in ability as he's gotten older, and with them losing Derek Stepan as their top-line center. I think that when I look at the 4 teams altogether, the New York Rangers, Boston Bruins, Buffalo Sabres, and Ottawa Senators, and I think about who's going to make the wild card, I still see the Rangers and Bruins as better teams right now. It's not by much, as it usually is a tight race for the wild card spots, but I do think they edge them out just a little.
Yeah, it hurt me a lot not to put the Sabres in that second spot. I mean, it's so hard. They are so close to some of these teams. Like, I do not think that they are much worse than the Boston Bruins. I think the Boston Bruins just have enough veteran presence on that team with guys like Marchand and Bergeron. I think they just have a good enough team to squeak into that second wildcard spot. And the Rangers, they're getting older. Rick Nash is another year older, but I just think that they're going to be scrappy enough with guys like Jimmy Vesey. I think he's going to have a pretty good season this year. I think that they're going to have a pretty good season, and they're still probably better than the Boston Bruins and the Sabres at this point, but not for long, man. That team is going to go downhill fast in a couple of years when their players age out.
Yeah, for sure. That goaltending situation is looking rough.
They made a terrible mistake by trading Ranta. He was most likely their future in net, and then after Lundqvist, I mean, do they have any goalie prospects in the system? I have not looked at their system recently, but I mean, it does not look promising at the goalie position.
They have Andrei Pavlik as their backup, as far as I know right now, and that is a strong decrease from Antti Ranta. He certainly brings in a starter's ability similar to what Scott Darling did for Chicago the last couple seasons. I think the Coyotes were happy to take him off of their hands because he's still only 27 or 28, I think, and like I said, he shows off the capabilities of a starter. You worry about who they have coming up the pipeline to replace Lundqvist when he's ready to go. All right, let's move on to the Western Conference. We're going to go to the Central Division. Minchin, you want to start this one off?
Yeah, for me, I'm going to have Dallas Stars in the first position. I'm going to have Nashville finishing at 2, and then I'm going to have Minnesota at 3.
I have the Minnesota Wild finishing first, the Dallas Stars finishing second, and the Nashville Predators finishing third.
I have the Nashville Predators finishing in first, the Dallas Stars in second, and the Chicago Blackhawks in third.
I have the Minnesota Wild finishing first, Dallas Stars finishing second, and the Winnipeg Jets finishing third.
Okay, so Tom, I like that Winnipeg Jets pick for third. I hope to see him there. I just don't know if the goaltending can get him there this season.
Their top 6 is so good. Their back end is pretty improved from last year, so I guess we'll see where it goes.
I mean, when you add a guy like Kulikov, how can you not expect your defenseman to get better?
Yeah. For any Winnipeg fans who might be listening or anyone who's interested in the team, watching him in Buffalo last year, unless it was just simply injuries that made him look that bad, I was not a fan of that contract. What are they paying him?
I think they're paying him really close to $4 or $5 million.
I think they're paying him
for
4.
years,
I think it's about $4.5 million a season.
which especially for his production in Buffalo is absolutely ridiculous. He was an absolute liability on the back end.
Exactly.
He's a solid physical defenseman to have on your bottom pairing, but if you have him in your top 4, unless he's playing with a really good player, it can be a bit worrisome. I certainly wasn't a fan of that contract. But besides the fact, if Steve Mason can come in and play well for them, I believe him and Connor Hellebuck will split games unless one of them really takes a grab on the starting job. They'll have better goaltending than they've had because I don't think Hellebuck was ready to take that starting job last season, and they had a rough time with goaltending. That's certainly what kept them out of the wild card spot for sure. And with the way the offense is, it's certainly right up there with the best in the league, and I'm sure that's what you're riding on, Tom, that has them in the top 3 playoff spots.
Yeah, their defense right now is looking like it's going to be Josh Morrissey and Trouba, Enstrom and Bufflin, and then Kulikov and Myers. So
Okay, good. So they do have them on that bottom 6 pairing. That makes me feel better.
I kind of feel bad for Tyler Myers.
Well, let's be honest. Tyler Myers isn't some great defenseman himself. He did win the Calder in 2010. And by the way, I need to correct myself from earlier. I believe Aaron Ekblad was the last defenseman to win the Calder, which was in 2013, I think. So it wasn't Tyler Myers. But anyways, back to the Jets. Myers is certainly a serviceable two-way defenseman. He can do his job. He's not some great top 4 defenseman as was advertised a few years ago. I like Josh Morrissey for the Winnipeg Jets, though. He's certainly coming into his own for them. And Dustin Byfuglien, good as always. What can you say? Just a big physical guy, good in his own zone, and versatile. Let's talk about the Nashville Predators. If they finish in the top 3 playoff spots in the Central, it'll probably be because of Pekka Rinne.
Yeah, I definitely think Pekka Rinne will be up there, but the team had an unusually really bad start to the season, picked it up near the end, and finished in that 16th playoff spot and ended up carrying on almost to the finals without their best center in Ryan Johansson.
that's definitely what kept them really out of truly contending with the Pittsburgh Penguins for the Stanley Cup. Losing Ryan Johansson was a big loss for them, and in the end, it's why they lost in 6 games rather than going to 7 and even possibly winning it.
Yeah, and I think Ryan Johansson coming back is obviously going to be a huge attribution and will probably help them get to that playoff spot. But I think if we're really going to talk about someone that's going to deter them from getting there, I think you got to talk about Ryan Ellis. Great top 4 defenseman, put up 50 points last year, is solid in the back end. They're really going to be missing him until January.
And that goes to what we were talking about earlier with PK Subban. I think they're going to split him and Yossi up. I don't know if they'll keep them on the same line, especially until January, until Ryan Ellis does get back.
Yeah, I definitely think with talent like that, you definitely got to split it up between the 2 lines and kind of move around your depth.
I'm not totally sold on Nashville because they got a lot of production out of guys like Frederick Gaudreau last year in the playoffs, Pontus Aberg, guys like that produce for them, and I just don't know if they'll be able to produce this year as much as they did last year in the playoffs.
Yeah, but then you also have to think that Philip Forsberg's probably going to come in next year. He's not going to be as inconsistent at the start. He's going to put up his good numbers through the whole 82 games, and then Victor Arvidsson's probably going to build on the year he had last year as well.
Yeah, and then you have Kevin Fiala coming back, who went out with a broken femur during the playoffs last year, which really sucked because he's certainly a dynamic player for them. I think he'll come in and put up probably 40 points this year. He looks like that type of player. He's got a lot of speed and great hands. He just scored a really nice goal in the preseason, I think. I saw that on Twitter just a couple days ago. He'll certainly be a good player who can probably make up for that lost production that Aberg and Gaudreau had last year in the playoffs.
Currently, Daily Faceoff has Scott Hartnell playing with Johansson and Philip Forsberg and not Arvidsson.
Yeah, they definitely are having him on that second line because they're probably more confident now with him as a winger with his own offensive ability now. He doesn't have to rely on just Johansson and Forsberg to put up those types of numbers. He'll probably see somewhat of a decrease in production because that was the best line in hockey probably over the second half of last year, but he's certainly capable of putting up 50 points on his own.
All right, let's move it on to the Pacific Division. I'm going to start for this one. So for my first place team in the Pacific, I have the Edmonton Oilers, followed by the Anaheim Ducks, and in third, I have the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, I'm right with you there, Nino.
Yeah, I'm there as well.
I actually have the Anaheim Ducks finishing first, the Edmonton Oilers finishing second, and I have the San Jose Sharks finishing third, which would be the same standings as last year. As prevalent as it is, the San Jose Sharks losing Marleau, he did put up 27 goals last year, but its production, I think, that can be made up somewhat with a lot of young, fast players they have coming in. I believe Timo Meier is slated to make the lineup. He's a good, crafty young winger who can score. I have been a Tomas Hertl fan since he had 4 goals in that game. I think it was 3 seasons ago.
3 seasons ago against Marty Brown and the Rangers.
Yeah, it was still awesome to see. And I've watched him in games against the Sabres as well and just in the playoffs. And he still looks like a good player. I think that he'll be ready to contribute a little bit more this season as long as he stays healthy, which has been a problem for him over the last couple seasons. I still think the Sharks are really good. They have guys like Pavelski, Couture, Brent Burns on the back end. You have Martin Jones in net, who most people would probably have somewhere in their top 10, top 12 area for goalies in the league. In the end, I think that's what's most important for them is if Martin Jones can have a good season, they'll certainly be in one of those top 3 playoff spots for the division.
Yeah, I definitely think they're going to be a great team, but it was tough for me to not put Calgary over them. I mean, Calgary's got Mike Smith now in goaltending. I think they have a very underrated defense with Giordano and Dougie Hamilton at the helm. And I think another huge factor that's going to play into it is going to be Johnny Gaudreau coming back and playing a healthy season. Last year, he went out with a freak hand injury, only put up 66 points, kind of struggled to find consistency when he came back from it. But I think this year he's going to play a full season. Him and Monahan are going to spark up again, and hopefully Monahan can put up close to what he did 2 years ago, right around 30 goals.
Right, and those of you who know Gaudreau's injury last year due to that slash that took him out, and he did struggle to find consistency after coming back from the injury. That is the primary reason the NHL is looking so much into increasing slashing penalties this year. That's why so many more of them are being called, because it's somewhat of a crackdown like they had in the early 2000s 2000s with hooking and holding. They believe it'll open up the game a lot more when guys can't hack your hands, hack your sticks. It's just a dirty way to get the puck off of good players, and teams know that, and that's why you get injuries like Johnny Gaudreau's.
Yeah, and one thing that really bothers me about that is when I hear fans saying that, they're not calling enough penalties in the modern NHL, and then when they start calling the penalties that should be called for slashing and stuff like that, they say that it's too ticky-tack. I mean, you can either have it one way or the other. You can't have it both ways. It's either they're going to call all the penalties or they're going to call none of them. So you have to pick a side. If you want more scoring, this is going to be good for the league because it's going to call more penalties. Teams are going to get more power plays. More goals are going to be scored. If you don't like the ticky-tack calls and you wanted it before, I don't know what to tell you.
Another addition that I think will really help the Calgary Flames is Travis Hamonic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having him as either a first or second line pairing defenseman, he was a great guy with the Islanders last year. He was their number one guy on a team that really wasn't awful. And now throwing him on the second pairing, I think with the huge upgrade in goaltending, Mike Smith, who's always been a great goaltender, has just played for a really bad team. Hopefully he can come in and play well.
Calgary's got a very good top four in Giordano, Hamilton, Brody, and Hamonic.
All right, let's move it on to the wild card predictions.
All right, I have the Calgary Flames as my first wild card spot, and the Chicago Blackhawks just clinging on to get that last wild card spot.
I have the Minnesota Wild in that first wild card spot, and not too far behind them will be the Winnipeg Jets.
I have the Nashville Predators at the first spot and the St. Louis Blues in the second.
For me, I'm going to have the Chicago Blackhawks in the number one spot and the Winnipeg Jets following them.
So do you not have Minnesota making the playoffs at all then? Were they in your top three?
No, yeah, Minnesota's third in the Central for me.
Oh, okay. I must have not heard that right. I thought you didn't have them making the playoffs. I do not have the San Jose Sharks making the playoffs, which I think will bother you a little bit, Ryan. I don't know. I just think that Winnipeg has enough offensive firepower now to get them over the hump and over the San Jose Sharks. And Minnesota, they've been pretty good for the past couple of years now. I don't think they're going to take a step back. I think they're going to cling on to that first wild card spot. So it was hard to find a spot for the Sharks and the Blues.
It's a fair point to make. I just believe that they have much better goaltending than the Winnipeg Jets do. You have Martin Jones on one side, and you have Steve Mason and Connor Hellebuck on the other. And in the end, goaltending is the most important position in the NHL because it's so hard to find really, really good goaltending. And Martin Jones has really become that guy for the San Jose Sharks the past couple years. I just think that's what's going to keep them in the playoffs. But aside from that, I really do like the Winnipeg Jets. I only have them missing the playoffs because of that goaltending problem. And I believe that them missing this year will get Paul Maurice fired. Whether you agree with that or not, he has been a middling coach for them. It's not like he has made any major improvements, and it's not like he's solely responsible for Laine coming in and being as good as he is. I have the St. Louis Blues just missing the playoffs as well. I don't believe Jake Allen can keep that trend up like he had going last season when he got hot in the second half of the year. I just don't see it happening this year and being consistent with it. And they don't play as defensive as a style without Ken Hitchcock anymore. I just doubt that they can keep streaks going enough or win enough games to keep them right in that playoff conversation. They'll be right around there, but I doubt that they can move themselves into a playoff spot.
All right, and with that, we'll get on to our last topic, which is our Stanley Cup predictions.
Okay, and for the Stanley Cup winner, this isn't going to be a surprise. I have the Pittsburgh Penguins winning, and I have them winning over the Anaheim Ducks.
All right, so I have the Tampa Bay Lightning facing the Anaheim Ducks, and I have the Tampa Bay Lightning coming out with the Stanley Cup victory.
I have the Pittsburgh Penguins winning the Stanley Cup over the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, and I have the Tampa Bay Lightning winning over the Edmonton Oilers.
Okay, so we got a little bit of variety here in the picks. I really like Anaheim to make it this year. I know they've been a favorite of the last few years, but they're still very good. And if Corey Perry has a bounce-back year, like Nino was saying, especially with him and Getzlaf playing together this year is what it looks like. If they can get hot, the team is certainly deep enough. They have definitely one of the best defenses in the Western Conference, and John Gibson is starting to really come into his own. It looks like they're at least going to go deep this year.
Yeah, I have them making it to the final, but I have them losing to the Tampa Bay Lightning just because of that forward depth. I mean, it's just incredible. I think it's going to carry them throughout the playoffs. Hopefully they can stay relatively healthy, not lose any of their big guys like they have the last couple of years. I think if they can make it to the final with a relatively healthy team, I think they're better than any team in the NHL that could also make it there healthy, especially if they play the Anaheim. I think that their style of play is best suited to beat a team like Anaheim. Their speed and their offensive firepower can best contradict a team that plays defensively like Anaheim.
Yeah, I agree with you on all that, Nino. I have Tampa winning the Cup as well, but the only thing I got different is I have them going over the Edmonton Oilers. Now, a lot of people are going to probably think that's a weird pick, especially with how good and dominant Anaheim's been, but like Nino said earlier in the podcast, they lost on a goalie interference call in Game 7 by 1 goal. You're talking about a Connor McDavid coming in this year who's got another year of experience, 2 series of playoffs under his belt. Draisaitl's going to be another guy who's got more experience. The whole team's going to have a great amount more playoff experience coming into this. Drake Caggiula is going to be coming into his next year. Hopefully other guys can find their stride as well. They're definitely a team who I think can take it all the way. And the number one reason for that is going to be Connor McDavid. You saw Sidney Crosby do it for the Pittsburgh Penguins when they did it, and Connor McDavid is right there with him for best player in the league. You're talking about a guy who can come in and put up the 30 playoff points.
Yeah, and it was kind of hard for me not to put them in the final because I had them as my President's Trophy winners. I just think Anaheim has enough depth on that blue line. I think they have more depth than Edmonton. I think they're going to play each other in the conference final. I just think that that depth is really going to outplay the Edmonton depth in a 7-game series.
I'm right with you, Nino, but I do have the Anaheim Ducks losing in the final to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I'm sure it's for the same reason that Tom has the Penguins beating the Wild in the final, because of the fact that they have such a strong core. Them and Tampa are certainly going to play a similar game to each other, but I think the fact that Pittsburgh has Malkin, Kessel, Crosby, who is still the best player in the game, it's arguable between him and Connor McDavid, but he's right there still. He's really playing like he's in the prime of his career right now. You have Chris Letang backing them up on defense. As long as he can stay in for the full season or at least be there for the playoffs, they're going to be playing in front of a fantastic Matt Murray, and I think that's good enough for them to win.
All right.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
All right, guys, thank you for listening. Really, we had a great time doing our first episode, and we're going to try to do one each week. We're going to do them on Saturdays, and we'll either release them Saturday night or Sunday morning. So subscribe and like the channel. We really want to see you come back and watch more of these videos because we enjoy doing it, and we hope we gave you an entertaining hour and some good information to go on going into the NHL season.
This has been the Center Ice Hockey Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more, and follow us on Twitter for the latest updates and news. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for more Center Ice Hockey coverage.